O blessed child of dreams, look now with eyes yet undimmed by many winters. Blessed are those who in waking moments see most clearly the unveiled nature of the eternal dream. For like unto a flower uncurling its petals, shall their eyes behold the time of Aveen.
Arlun the Radiant, Scripture of the Alua Ayina. It had always been so between you two, that this thing would occur. This sharing of liminal space between that which can be seen and heard, and that which can only be assumed. Like a soft, whispering caress, long lingering after its memory fades. So had it ever been the nature of these dreams to give insight into the eyes of another world, another life even, but one without the certainty of knowing. For who could say whether such fantastic things held even a glimmer of truth? For no thing can be certain except for the designs of Ra, or so the Venorian priests proclaimed from atop their spacious temples. You had always shared in the dreams, each of you in turn holding prominence and position within its twisted confines. Sometimes by a hierarchy self-imposed, and other times more fluidly, as each in turn took hold of the reins of control. But always in tandem were you both present to observe and connect, to glean that which was present within the dream itself, a looking glass into a strange and unyielding world. Glean now from this what you shall, both of you intertwined, interlinked, as you drift down into another dream. Your eyes open, and behold,
Your eyes open, both amber and green alike. All about you rise heavy stalks of grass, swaying against the unfaltering wind which ravages its course across the ancient prairie. You have been here before, both of you, many times. An unyielding, expansive sea of whistling brown stalks. Atop each, a strange, fluted pod, which whistles as the wind ravages through them, creating an eerie, cacophonic melody of strange choruses across the land as you move. It is now your time to act. You begin to move, unhaltered, unyielded by your sibling. As to you, Yarian, within this form you share, what do you do now? You look around as you are propelled forward by the whims of your sibling. And then your eyes are caught, starkly, by a singular monument on the horizon. An alteration within the landscape of the prairie. Something new and different. This is eye-opening. For before, this endless sea had been but that. Endless, unaltered, unchanged, with nothing but its strange melodies and its eerie precepts. But now a hill stretches before you, not far from where you stand. It rises up and out of the grass, monolithically, darkly rising against the horizon like a disformed hump, like a tumor on the landscape. Atop its rocky surface, its craggy recesses, you can see a pillar. It stands there, tall and stout, unapologetically breaking the endless monotony of the grass about it. You make your way towards the beginning of the hill. The slope beneath your feet changes slightly, shifting upwards, becoming steeper. You find your face cut by the wind. Now that you no longer have the stalks of grass about you, the wind is free to bite at your unprotected flesh. The body in which you share now is strong, young, but weathered, with a face burnt by the wind and the sun above. Your hands ruddy, with scars and lines of care across them, speaking of many hardships. You come at last to the edge of the hill itself, looking up its steep paramount. You will need to climb. It is too steep simply to walk up its slope, and you see no easy way to ascend the top. One of you may roll if you wish. D20, no bonus. You may choose who. In this regard, there is no bonus, but in future there may be a bonus dependent on who steps forward. But for this, there is not. I guess Yarian will be taking this on for the rest of time. Now, you grasp the Go ahead, you first. Yes. As you are climbing, it is strength. Or the fortitude within the body itself. You grasp firmly the first rock. Control being given over to you, Yarian. You feel the control of your legs still, though, muddled. As you try to disentangle and give Yarian the control over the form itself. You begin to climb, as your father taught you. Hand over hand, finding handholds and footholds, pressing yourself close to the rock, keeping your shoulders taut and your grip strong. It's exhausting, and the wind batters and beats at you, cold and fierce. Strong enough to leave physical marks on your form. Small cuts here and there opening on your ruddy flesh. A sense of fatigue begins to wash over you, Yarian, as you climb. But so close to the summit you are, there is no turning back. One of you may roll if you wish, or one of you may come forward, taking note that the fortitude and strength that one has is transferred. The energy is shared, if that makes more sense. Yarian's exertions can become Marletta's exertions, thus lessening the load.
Do you come forward suddenly, or do you discuss this with your sibling as you climb, as not to wrench control and fall? You push forward, past Yerian's control, to lend your own energy to the effort. You may roll, as well, a d20. Keep or roll. I won't say it again in future, of course, as to not muddle discussion. You keep the 7. Alright. You continue to climb, though less assuredly than your brother. The experience of your hands not as deft as his own. But, in time, you come to the top of the peak. There, with hands bloodied by the sharp stones, and with legs battered and numb with the wind, you look to the monolith itself, its silhouette against the burnt sky, strangely comforting, something solid, unmoving in the nature of the wind. You see the sky behind it, and it is as it always has been. That strange golden scar which streaks across it day and night, still stark in your vision. A bloody hole in the cosmos itself. Slowly, the red sun sets, no longer lending its eerie, strange light to the lands around you as you sit atop. Action from either of you if you would like. There is a ring of stones set near to the monolith, and you can see within that ring the remnants of ash, black and gray, but no cinder. Once there was a fire here in this pit of stone, but now there is only the wind and the cold. You see also the roots of a great tree atop the hill, but one long felled, either by wind or by man's own hand. Dry, dead branches litter the top of the slope. Some lean up against the monolith, and others are strewn like bones across the rusty ground. Night comes then. As you sit and speak one to another, the stars illuminate the sky. Twinkling with guile, you see the rising of the moon, and it is comforting and familiar. Both within the dream and without, you recognize it. Auditory, the great gem of the night. The monolith peers down at you with its black, smooth, almost glassy surface, as though admonishing you for your action, as though judging your worth.
Walk over to the long abandoned fire pit, looking down into it. You see something there strange among the ash then, half buried within the remnants of a fire that once was. A piece of cloth flapping in the wind, partially burnt, pieces of it still, though, threaded, kept in place. Only the weight of the remnants of this pit have kept it from being blown off into the wind and being lost forever. You reach down, and then grabbing the piece of cloth and lifting it, you find it more heavy than you thought, wrapped about something. As you lift it up and out of the ash, you watch as something long and spindly spins out of the cloth as it unravels and finds its way to rest on the ash. A piece of yellowed bone, a finger, or a toe perhaps. You are uncertain if it is human, long, yellowed, in places blackened by the flame but not destroyed. Oh, good. Another strong gust of wind blows across the top of the mountain, or sorry, the top of the hill. You watch as ash gently floats away, now disturbed by your hand. It floats off into the wind and into the night. You see more bones within the pit. The last remnants the top of a skull. This was not simply a fire pit. No, it goes deeper. You can see that parts of that old skeleton are buried beneath the ash, as though a pit was dug or something of the like. You see the rest of the hand now with the finger missing that you dislodged. Yes, a single structure. You can only see the top of the skull as far as from where you stand looking down, the light of the moon glinting off of its blackened surface. The hand is a mix of yellowed and blackened bone, one finger now missing, setting near to the skull. The rest of the body, if it is there, is submerged beneath the ash, packed tightly into the ground. Now, you would not be able to determine that either from history or from your own look. It's alright. Do you move? Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I was about to say, do you move to do anything yet, Ian? But I've already been given something of verbal permission from Arletta, so. Do you move to uncover them from the ash? You move forward, digging your bloodied fingers into the ash. Pain racks up through your fingers and your arm. But soon the cold ash packing the wound makes it so the blood flow stops from your hands. No longer are your wrists streaked with fresh blood from your climb to the summit. You uncover the skull first, and then the shoulders. Whoever this was, they were smaller. Not a child, but not fully an adult. You come to the ribcage, and there you find the strangest discovery yet. It has been destroyed. A few of the lower ribs blasted away. They look as though they have been burnt, smoldering still even. As you uncover this, you see that the back of the spine behind the ribs as well is burnt, blasted and blackened, unlike the rest of the skeleton which is yellowed, and only blackened in some places. I've said it just looks as though something of a hole was either broken out or forced or perhaps caved in, either internally or externally. You can't tell from the way it looks if it was something coming out or something going in. But the entire section around where the ribcage is destroyed is burnt, and the hole there is gaping. Also, as you uncover the skeleton, the jawbone falls off, no longer having anything to hold it up or connect it to the rest of the body. It limply thunks into the ash, looking up at you with yellowed teeth, mocking you. You feel... Go ahead, sorry, you first. Okay. You feel your body now weary from the exerts of the climb and from the digging in that pit. Slowly, the fatigue rolls over you in waves. You feel dizzy, lightheaded, the numbness of the wind bringing your cheeks to full flush. You see your hands have gone pale. You are not yet freezing, but the frigid air is not comfortable. You feel yourself drifting in that familiar and almost comfortable way, a sign that soon this dream will end, and you shall wake to the monotony of the morning light, of the journey on the road of the hardship shared, and the dream shall be no more. As you're doing that, Yerian, what are you doing? Yeah. The two of you together recognize this and sit back on the ground, each in turn going through the motion, one unanimous decision. It is time to go. You hear the wind gently fade until at last it is no more in your ears. The whistling song of the prairie dissipates, and then you feel it, that tug, loose at first and then sharp. A moment
of lift. You ascend. In that space and time of darkness, a myriad of beautiful lights surrounding you, and then, at last, your eyes open. Both of you come awake, lying on the surface of the wagon board, hard against your backs. A gentle but cold wind blows outside the carriage, and you can hear the snoring of Gomer from where he lies not too far from the two of you. You are pressed up against each other, as siblings do, keeping each other warm from the freezing cold of the frigid north of Vene. Soon it will come the time of Avine. You can see it, the slight light coming from outside the wagon as the sky brightens. You peek your head out in between the wood of the cart and the canvas covering it. You gaze around the landscape of North Vene, rolling muddy hills, dry brushes and shrubs lining in every direction, and a few old trees, thickets here and there, not a forest as much as a wood. Most birch, some of them off-sill, standing tall and proud. You hear the trickling of a brook not far from the road where you, now, and your wagon lay at rest. The gentle pattering of the water as it flows southward towards the bay. You can see to the north and west the great ranges of the mountains of Ram encircling their valley like sentinels at the watch. Yelian, your sister has moved to now peek out and look outside the wagon. Half in, half out, you see her head disappear. To your left, you hear Gomer stir. He snorts and snores, becoming grunts, and then his eyes open. He looks at you, as though if in his own slumber he knew you had come awake and he had refused you to be alone in this singular moment of peace before the coming of Avine.
Yeah, again.
He looks... Or, go ahead. Okay. Good. He looks to her letter, half in, half out.
What? Looking at things you have seen 100 times before. Expecting the landscape to change, are we? Ah. Well, you're both awake. I do not smell wood smoke, so I will assume that no fire has been set, and no water to boil on the kettle.
He grins at that, and then looks at you devilishly, Arletta.
Well? Good.
And then he turns to look to you, Yarian.
Yarian, my boy. Come, help your old father fetch firewood, lest his bones wither and become old and brittle from the labor of the field.
You and Glomra step out of the cart
The older man stretching and cracking his back as he appraises the sky.
Look, soon will come the time of Aveen. That most precious moment when Oyuna decides to show her naked beauty to the world, the slut. He shrugs and looks around. He nods to a small thicket near to the road. See if we can salvage anything dry enough to burn. You collect the large pewter kettle. It's one of the few things that you own which is in good condition. You have to fill it from the stream near to the campfire itself. In the meantime, Yerian and Gomra make their way near to the thicket and begin the procurement of firewood for the morning brew. What do you do, Arletta? You have the kettle. Unfilled, yes, but it is there. Did, but the cold and the damp of North Vene has made it unusable. Have to be built again. You'll need to take out everything damp in the pit, down to the bare ash beneath, clearing it, and then, well, you don't necessarily have the fire nor the matchsticks required to set it alight. That task is on Yerian and Gomer at the moment. Indeed, there is the small brook near to the road. Head on over. I forget the name of the garment. We'll find it later. It's like a shawl, yes. It's a Vene garment. You have this over the top of a poncho, over the top of a traveling dress, and then your underclothes and also the wraps about your feet and hands, which are insufficient, which should be said at best. You feel the tips of your fingers going numb and your nose and cheeks going ruddy with the cold. Quickly, you make your way over to the brook, carrying the heavy kettle, which will only get heavier once water is poured into it. You notice by the brook the small petals and leaves nestled near to that source of water. The kaleidoscopic light of the first moments of Aveen gleaming down off each of the droplets, radiant. You're caught by their beauty for a second. Those moments of crystalline reflection as you look down at yourself within the brook. Pale, hawk-nosed, thin, messes of hair running down your back and shoulders as you kneel. You fill the kettle as much as you can and then lift it, a pain running up through your back and legs from the weight of the thing. You may roll d20. You have a -1. Alright. You manage to lift the kettle, and then slowly begin to make your way back, carefully as not to spill the contents. You come closer and closer to the fire pit near to the wagon. In the meantime... Yes, alright. Grumbling all the while. Yarian, or you go ahead first. All right. Yerian, in the meantime, you and Gomer have stooped in the grass and are parsing your way through handfuls of fallen branches and occasionally lifting up to break a fresher branch off a tree or two. You're looking for where they are driest, deeper within the thicket. Anything that doesn't contain so much moisture that it would create a lot of smoke. Gomer hates smoke, at least the kind that doesn't come from his pipe. He grumbles and groans and stretches his back all the while, putting on the affecture and the airs of a man much older than he actually is. While you work, he turns.
Have I discussed with you, Yerian, where we are going?
Not to your memory, and if he was, it was in one of his fits of rambling about his plans, so it's been lost.
Well then, it seems that I have been most remiss. We are heading to Serway. It's a small hamlet near to the Valley of Rom. Of course, on the eastern side of the range. I would say that we should make it there perhaps by nightfall if we are lucky, but knowing the Copper's health, we may not be so. What? Nothing to say? You'll have enough to say on the road, I'm assured. You better,
He says, looking at you with a devilish grin.
or you know the cost of silence. I will not abide it.
He looks over his shoulder.
The girl is slow. She has barely gotten the kettle ready. Why couldn't she have been born, son?
He shrugs, grimacing, and looks back to you.
At least I have one good, strong heir.
He grins at that.
We will need to find you a pretty Tavish girl. One of good blood. I expect children, Yarian.
He says, almost laughing.
Many. You wouldn't know what to do with a girl if she was on top of you already. Limper than a magistrate's hair, no doubt.
He picks up a few more pieces of wood, or before pulling out his hunting knife and breaking down some of it to kindling.
Now, you may be asking yourself, Delian, deep inside that most intuitive mind of yours, why Serway?
And coughs a bit in the cold air.
Why a Northern Vene hamlet? No?
He grins.
Good, good. Curiosity is an important and most subtle thing. I am glad I've riled it up within you, youngster. Sarway. What is important about Sarway? Well, let your old brittling father tell you. Lend him your ear keenly. There is a Irish contingency settled in Sarway. Yes, in fact, there is a proctor there. A higher-up individual within the confines of the Irish themselves. And also, there is a wayman, an alderman of sorts, who oversees Sarway. He is one of the few individuals who can write off on a lease of passage. Of course, you must be asking yourself, a lease of passage where? Where do you think, Yerian?
The only place within Vene that would require such a lease of passage would be the openings to the Valley of Rom itself over the mountain passes. But no one has been permitted to go there outside of the Urshface themselves for many, many years. It is considered a taboo location. A place which once housed the Venorian faith's largest temples and was something of a mecca for the Venorian within Venelan. Which, the Valley of Rom? I will type it to you, since notes are always good. Valley of Rom.
Precisely. But it will not be cheap. Bribes will need to be paid to the correct individuals. And last time I checked, our coin perch was, well, criminally low. Or perhaps for a lack of criminality, it is low. We will need to amend that when we arrive at Sarway. Why don't you set your mind to ruminations on a plan? I would like to hear it before we arrive, of course, so think long and think well. We will need money, coin, Galar and Senar alike. I think we've collected enough wood. Let's return. Hopefully the girl has been more punctual than of late.
The two of you make your way back towards the old campsite.
In the meantime, Arletta, you have set the kettle down as close to the pit as possible. You have arranged the pieces of metal on which it most often swings by a metallic hook. This sort of... what is the device called? It's a common device. It forms a sort of three-way tripodish frame on which they would... It's a medieval device on which they would hook pots and kettles and such to hang over fires or hearths. I forget the name of it. There's a specific name, but I don't remember what it's called. It doesn't matter right now. You've set this up above the pit. And then you found yourself in a moment without something to do. That being you, Arletta. Yes, you have everything necessary to his personal preferences. But it should be said, if you are not at least looking busy, you know you'll be scolded. Alright, you begin looking through what's in the cart, basically. Pots, pans, old wood axe, a can full of nails, a sack of salt dangerously low, some old milled corn flour for the making of road biscuits. And of course, those mushrooms and bark and herbs that you have foraged from the surrounding landscape in the past few days where you could. Though it may just be the beginnings of autumn, it still, in the north of Vene, has the apparel of winter wrapped tightly about it. Oh, how you miss the Southlands closer to the shore, the warmer, more temperate summers and autumns, and the almost brisk winters. While your father finds it necessary to travel in the dreaded north, who can tell? Probably one of his normal, long-ranging schemes that he speaks so longly and so verbosely about. While you're rummaging around, you hear the other two arrive back in the campsite. The sound of Gomra's boots on the dirt and the small pitter-patter of Yarian's own steps alerting you to their arrival. You pull your head from the cart. Yarian, you see Arletta poking her head out of the wagon to look at you. The cobra brays loudly, distinctly, a sort of warbling to its tone as it lowers its head back down to graze. It's an old beast, its 3 horns weathered, yellowed, its eyes glazed over with cataracts and age. Gomer looks at it sternly.
That old beast may not last us much longer. Cash!
He swears, Mirkari.
Another roadblock. I swear. Can't things ever look up? I guess they will. Soon enough. When all this is done, I'll have no need of cabras.
Gomer snaps and looks to you. Go ahead, Yarian, first, though. You sit down what you have. Gomer turns to bring his look of disapproval upon you, Arletta.
Well then, Arletta, I see you have brought the kettle with water. Have we brought enough firewood for the fire? Well, let us think, shall we? Let us open those so strange eyes of yours. Look, see what I'm carrying in my arms, and what Yarian has produced from the labor in the field of his own doing? Yes, this is wood, and tinder, and kindling. Is there enough? Why would I bring less than enough?
At that, he grins, not menacingly, just in his normal sardonic way, showing only the top row of his teeth. Go ahead.
Astute. But look in my arms. What is this? Is this perhaps the tinder and sticks from yonder forage? It looks as though there was good wood. So I will assume that you assertively have decided to bring up such nonsense as to create form of verbal conflict, perhaps a internal game or machination of your own ploys,
he says, lifting an eyebrow, smiling softly.
Perhaps the sound of my voice brings you solace. Listening to your own as you wander and mumble, having gotten old. I swear, my children. Well, you are my children. I think. Who knows? Seeds of my loin travel far. You certainly are my child,
he says, looking to Yarian.
No question of that. Those cheekbones, that chin.
He grins.
The stubble on your cheek. You should grow a beard when you can. Not in these lands, of course. You'll just be glared at, stared at like some sort of theatrical monkey in a cage. as though they can't comprehend the necessity of facial hair. Savages. Should be said that these outbursts from Gomra are a common day occurrence, and at this point you have come to know them as just a part of his personality. His tangenting, his outbursts, his wit, his sarcasm, his biting retorts, all par and the course for your father. You make your way over to the pit. Gomra stoops in close as well, and the two of you working to set the necessary configuration of the fire so that it may be used for the kettle. Once it's done, he pulls out his matchbox. Would either of the two of you like to take test your hand at it? If you break the match, there will be words, but if you succeed, he says, grinning, there will be a serene silence. Try. Oh, you will try, Yerian. But I implore you, don't waste my precious matches. He sets the box down near to the fire and rummages in his own robe to pull out the strange long pipe you have long seen him with. The bowl is square-shaped, the pipe itself long and straight. You've seen many men smoke with many pipes, but never one like your father's. He packs it with tobacco, and lighting it, he watches as you make your way over to the fire itself. Action from either of you if you would like. You make your way to attempt to light the fire. You may roll a d100. You may roll a d100 when you are ready. Not sure if the call cut or something. Alright, you may. 45 or higher. Well, pass the check. Gently you lower yourself, finding where the tinder and the moss provided have been balled up underneath the sort of lean-to structure that's been built in the center of the pit. You light the edges of this, blowing gently, fanning it with your hands as it grows, and eventually catches light to the rest of the wood. Groma nods with approval. Very good, very good. A clean strike of the match. That is what I would expect. No waste. Use what is given. Take what is not. More importantly, waste nothing. He sits down next to the fire, pipe between his lips. Aleta, come, sit, join us. But dirty not your dress. We do not have time to clean it before we arrive in our next location. And I need you looking your best. Absolutely. Would you expect anything less? I swear, they are less of schemes and more of a child's game when it comes to the Vene. Slow-minded race. And the tavern. No one would fall for such simple schemes. I swear, the Tarvish blood runs thin. I'm getting sick of it all. The hawk noses, the pale skin, the niceties, the the religious prattling. Gas. Damn it all. Now, Yerian, when we get to Tavra, or even better, to the Alarum, there we will need to be clever and sharp. I am afraid this land has dulled my wit, and I hope it has not dulled yours. I need you to be sharp, concise.
He smiles. The kettle has been set to boil, and the tea leaves are steeping. He has mixed the tea with birch bark for the necessary nutrients that he so, admonishes himself for lacking. In the meantime, he smokes his pipe. He blows puffs of air into the cold night, or into the cold morning, when he looks up at Oyuna.
We'll be out of the cold soon enough. Roof over our heads, and if we're lucky, straw under our backs. Would you like a go, Yerian?
He says, taking the pipe out of his mouth and proffering it towards you.
Warms the chest, the nose.
Very. It is a brisk cold autumn day in the north of Vene. He has never offered this to you before, it should be said. You don't really know what you're doing. But you've seen him go through the motions. I assume you mimic those as best you can, or what do you do? You take the pipe, long and thin in your hand, smelling the sweet pipeweed, the aroma of it burning with the cinder, a mix of smoke and something sickly almost to the scent. And then you draw in from it. Roll. D100. Normally it'll always be a D100 unless I specify 20. 20 is the specified roll. D100 is what I normally always will mean. Average. All right. You breathe in. As it is your first time, you breathe in too much into your lungs, not holding it in your mouth, and you sputter, coughing it out. It is warm to the throat, almost hot. Uncomfortably so. You breathe out what you can, coughing and sputtering. Gomer laughs, taking the pipe from you.
You have to be gentler with it. You need to bring it just into your mouth. Let it play upon the tip of your tongue. And then exhale.
He breathes it out. There's a strange numbness in your throat. Whatever it is he's smoking has more of effect to it than tobacco, but you feel a calming almost over you, very slight. The numbness at the tips of your finger dwindling just slightly, pleasantly. He empties his pipe and pours the tea into wooden cups you have so rightly obtained, Arletta. That he hands these to each of you.
I'll be back on the road soon enough. Once the kettle is cold enough, pour it out our leather. Then pack up everything else. In the meantime, Yerian, let's see to the cabra,
he says, holding up his cup. He drinks it as he moves towards the animal.
It will not last much longer, but at least we will meet soon. Now we may have to abandon the cart. We won't be able to carry it.
These empty spaces are just moments for either of you to do whatever. Up to you. You You are going to Saraway. I'll write that for you as well. The hamlet of Saraway. It's small. It's like a town. Hamlet of Saraway. You were, in fact, told to come up with a scheme by the time you arrive, which, as your father said, might be in the evening. Not that Arletta knows anything about any of that. She's not in the loop. You've never been to Sarway, but as it is one of the northern provinces, you would assume that most likely it is either connected to or, well, in some way, a producer of goods for either Brexfor or I believe it's Aurn. Auren, or Brexfor. I'll just write down names as I say them. These are two northern mining towns. Well, one more a city than a town. You know of them because you have been schooled through them many times. Brexfor itself is one of the main gold mines, which, after the necessary minerals and materials are procured from the mines themselves, are shipped southward across the road and down the river. They make their way through both the city. I forget the name of it. Oh, I forget the name of it. There is a city down on the left side of the forked river that leads its way to Daskis and Red Tower. I will remember it later. Right now I don't have time to look through my notes. Nonetheless, it makes its way through that city, and then it's shipped down by boat from that city down to either Red Tower or Daskis, where then it is shipped by Admiral Convoy to the Tarvish Idavar, and to the cities of Procandor and Pra-Jacilian, where it is minted into coin. You would assume that most likely a hamlet so close to Brexfor and Auren would take the position of either being farmland, necessary to feed the miners and the workforces in those places, or perhaps lumber, or perhaps a halfway town, a place of travel between the many roads. In the meantime, while you look over the Cabra, Arletta, what are you doing? Packing up any necessary effects or any of the supplies you brought out for the boil. Probably packing away the herbs and tea leaves and the bark. You can also set the kettle down on the ground and take the small metal tripod with its hook and store that away as well. Alright. You begin this task. The morning rolls by. And then, when all necessary arrangements are done and finished with, and all things are packed away and the fire staunched with water from the brook, the three of you set on to the back of the wagon itself. And then, at last, you set to the road. It is something you have done many times. Comfortable. Relatable. Monotonous. Schemes and plots and ploys. Never normal work. On occasion thievery, but most often something a little more elaborate. Gomra has never liked to be the subtle one when it comes to his proclivities. In the last town you passed through, well, your father prosed as a Prishalan and as a reader. Something of a mystic man who offered advice to the locals. That was Stellenport, which still in its own right holds a small Venorian population, which is rare in Vene, as the practices have mostly been outlawed. He, of course, swindled his way, telling the young women of the men they would marry, and the old women of the comfort and riches that their children would send home from the garrisons at port. Of course, giving hope here and there, but with the ominous and less than occasional utterance of some dark becoming or curse on some young man to make him uneasy. Honestly, Gomer most likely did these things for his own enjoyment, to unsettle the populace. He seems to have always found discomfort or comfort in the discomfort of others, at least those who he deems lesser. You will think of it. You also have on occasion been accomplice to many of these plots and ploys. In fact, you have been a centerpiece in some of them, rather to your own discomfort on occasion, Arletta. I mean, he has not done the unthinkable, as in selling you out to men, but he's gotten close, it should be said. There was a magistrate, an Irish man, in one of the towns where there was a transaction that was preceded by the town guard breaking in the door and you scrambling to throw on your clothes as a local Irish priest was dragged to the constabulary's establishment. This setup, of course, leaving the house unprotected and unmanned for you and your brother and Gomer himself to make away with a decent portion of the man's food stores and wealth. Of course, that money long time ago was burned through. This is just an example of how far Gomer goes with some of his schemes. It was not. You probably would have been against such a thing, as it could have ended disastrously or disastrously. Not need waste her time with the details, he says, looking back behind him. Do not speak as me as if I am not here. Nonetheless, the two of you put your heads together and come up with something. Otherwise, we'll go with my plan, which I already have prepared. Think of this as a test, Yelian. Gomer grins at that. Yes, Yelian, yes. Let us do that. In an Irish settled town, I am sure they will have stakes aplenty to burn us at. Alu and all. Perhaps some meta information should have been shared there. Maddox may know, but that kind of stuff, in general, Brett, would be looked at as the works of an Alu, which most likely would get you burned alive. Not saying it's not a good plan, you just have to find the right individuals to play it to. That's what you did in Stellenport, since there were Venorians there. But the Irish are superstitious, strict, and domineering when it comes to their beliefs about the esoteric.
as we should do with many things. Well, the two of you think it over. In the meantime, it is time for a game of questions. A wit must be sharpened like a knife, as I always say. So then, Yerian, a question for you. You are a broker, a loan shark. Not in a necessarily large city, but it has a populace of note. You are a man with something of a reputation, one which is not treaded on easily, and one that you have built for a long time. Perhaps some blood was spilled, perhaps you were more tactful. That is irrelevant to the question. But nonetheless, a regular tenant of yours has found himself lacking in the necessary funds, and he is now doubly due on his monthly payments. How do you resolve this situation while keeping face? How do you deal with this problem? As always, you are permitted to ask any questions you would desire about the situation in question. Just know that any question you ask may expand the parameters to become more complex as you add on layers. One such a fellow, yes. He works on the west end of town, you the east. Your territories do not cross nor mix, as to the law of such individuals. Ah, very well then. You're going to sell the man's debt to the other man, then? What happens if this man fails to pay to that man? He will come to you, saying that you have been paying him in false contracts. What if he refuses to accept? What do you do then? You're indebted. Maybe? You're indebted? Not what I would have expected. So thus, you in favor yourself with the general public, but perhaps lose faith with some of the more unruly and unsavory sorts. This, of course, both positively and negatively impacts your image. You are seen as an individual who perhaps may be more easily walked out upon. Arletta, how would you solve this conundrum? This scenario, if you will. Empty-headed as always. You are a loan shark. A common tenant of yours has failed to make his rent. You have a reputation, one earned through strictness and punctuality. How do you resolve the situation and keep face? Oh, specifics. Adding layers then. Very well. The man is named Arlo Casaldi. He's a Larish, a winemaker, a Galdameni, if you will. And his latest shipment of wine has sunk at sea, leaving him with a dear lack of coin in his purse. Thus, he cannot pay you. How do you settle? Ah. If you destroy his stock, what does he have left to sell? How does he ever pay you back then? So, how do you amend this situation? Taking note that he has a wife who is pregnant and 2 small children, yet to have come of age, along with a cohort of a few Cephlari guards. Perhaps maybe half a dozen. Not a small gathering, or small gathering for Havare of a Galdameni. Now that layers have been added to the question, has your answer changed, Yarian, based on the change of circumstance and the perimeters of the scenario? A permanent stake in the man's own acclaim. All right. And you, Arletta, how would you solve this conundrum? Well, you think. Yarian, you have taken a percentage. What is that percentage that you request from his future profits? What number do you set? 2 months. The actual numbering is 1 gav 57 senar. That is enough to buy 2 strong horses, or to feed a man for over half a year. We would say percentage-wise, it is perhaps maybe... I would say perhaps maybe... He thinks for a while, doing permutations in his own head. I would say perhaps it is... He owes you perhaps 15% of his yearly income. This, of course, is not including Ilarish tax on wine. You press upon his head a quarter stake in his business. All right. How do you enforce that if the man disagrees? That is a large stake, after all. I see. Arletta, have you come up with a satisfactory answer? If your mind goes with his, it can only be because of my astute tutelage of you both. You are like-minded because I am like-minded. He grins. Ha. Once again, I have managed to cultivate the necessary seeds within you both, it seems. Very well. I, personally, myself, would have used the man's wife to my advantage. Perhaps sent her to the Pshalan house.
He seems to think a long while, drifting off as though in thought. Yes.
That is what I would have done, isn't it? It adds to the exoticness of the product, does it not? There is a certain sense of visceral ownership. The man, well, his wife is quite fragile in his current state. And I can assuredly grace him with the assurance that only the gentlest of stock will accompany her in her chambers as a Prashala. I leverage this, of course, saying that perhaps it would not remain so. I, of course, have them sign the necessary contracts with the Prashalan, and I keep him under a short leash. But continuing, is there anything you would wish to add on to your answers, either of you? How would you rough him up if you had to, Yarian? What implements would you employ? Would you use thugs, as Arletta has suggested? Or how would you go about it? Of course not. Let us say you had, as you put... Oh, you were continuing? Go ahead, then. Regale me. Next complication, then. Yes, precisely. Do not think of it as a complication. Think of it as an exciting new step in the journey that must be overcome. Absolutely. The man runs away by ship, never to be seen again, leaving one of his young heirs in charge of his Galdameni business. You, of course, still hold stake in his company, a stake which his son begrudgingly accepts, but also, as you can see, merely speaking with the man, despises. He does not like you, nor does he appreciate your permanent ownership within his family's own business. He may seek to undermine you, to outmaneuver you in some way. Or perhaps he will sit quietly like the indentured dog he is. You cannot tell. But still, how do you move forward with this new scenario of events? This runaway father and this new young fiery heir to the Galdameni Havare? Well, you think. Arletta, are you quicker on the feet? What have you come up with this new scenario? How do you resolve this conflict? How? How do you find this man? He has fled to the Parium Archipelago as far as you are aware. Hundreds of islands, palaces, cities and towns.
You begin to look into his history. How would you go about this? Where would you acquire that information? Ah, you put the iron to his family then. How do you go about this? How do you procure the information from them? Do you perhaps leverage their emotional disconnection from the man who abandoned them to sell him out? Or what other means would you employ? Playing with loyalty. But loyalty can be a strange thing, especially among family. The young son sees you as the progenitor of the reason why his father had to flee in the first place, and refuses you the information, saying that he does not know where his father dwells, nor knows of any particular place that his father would favor within the archipelago. Think on it a while. Now, Yerian, what have you managed to come up with in this time? Ah, diplomatic. You two take a very different approach, it seems. You seem to be headstrong on the diplomacy, the natural and more amicable resolution, whereas Arletta's plots and schemes seem to be more on the side of maintaining face and growing the reputation. Both are admissible, both are acceptable. The difference in direction, though, is palpable. Even though this scenario could be dragged out longer, I think we have learned from it what we can. For now, at least. He thinks for a second. Commendable enough. Now on to the next daily lesson. Very well.
You listen to the sound of the cart beneath you, Yerian, as you think about what to do before you arrive within Sarway. Arletta ruminating on your own internal thoughts. Gomra turns to the both of you, and in the way you have found most familiar, begins the daily series of questions. Most commonplace and most nostalgic. This is how it goes. Now then, shall we play the game of questions? I may ask of each of you one thing, one question. You must answer truthfully and to the best of your ability. And I, in turn, will be subject to one query each. Do not be wasteful. This is my gift to you. So then, shall we begin? Who shall ask first? I or you? He says, looking between the two of you. Very well. Then, let me see. Arletta, what do you believe is the cost of being wealthy?
As the three of you talk, a light rain begins to fall. It scatters its drops across the ground and lands a series of cold, icy darts blown by the wind into your faces and onto your bare skin. Gomer pulls the canvas of the wagon tighter about. He nods to you. An acceptable answer. What are the other costs of being wealthy? How does it affect a person? What price is paid? A sense of obligation. Good. One other thing, then. What else is the cost of wealth? He's got that unsettling smile on his face, the one where he shows only his top row of teeth, his mouth stretched thin, his eyes narrowed, his eyebrows furled in an expression of both contemplation and consternation. Gomra Vicente is always seeking a particular answer. It has been the paramount of his conversations with the two of you. He is always pushing you towards a precise answer, the answer which he believes to be most correct. He calls it the Envier's method. One of the more common things he will always say about wealth, this is not necessarily the answer he's trying to get you to give, is that he believes that wealth breeds fear. You have wealth, and you fear to lose it. Because you fear to lose it, you spend wealth to keep it. And then you grow it. But as your wealth grows, your fear grows, and the amount you spend to keep that wealth grows with it. One of the costs of wealth, he would say, is the price of never being assured in its own, or is the knowing that that wealth can be fragile, and that the position you hold is not set in stone. But it does not seem as though he is swaying the conversation towards that kind of outcome. It seems that he is trying to be more philosophical with the question. So the cost of wealth is insecurity and risk. Then why would anyone become wealthy? Simply put, it is because the allure greatly outweighs the risk. It is a gamble. And only those who are ready should take it. Only those who are prepared. Only those who are right. Do you think that we are worthy of wealth? to take on that risk? This question seems almost dangerous in the way he says it. There is a trap there, you can sense it. Well? Gomer looks between you and Yerian, waiting. There has never been a problem with that in the past. Gomer looks to you, Yerian. Well, it seems that the cobra has caught the girl's tongue again. Hopefully it doesn't bite it off. Would you have something to add? My young Yerian.
I had to mute to laugh because nothing more true has ever been said.
Ah, that is my Yarian. No one more worthy. And that comes at a cost. Well then, Yarian, a question for you then. What is Sarway?
You instantly pick up on this as an Anvir's question, as your father would call it. He will keep layering it as you answer you know already. You know that the answer is just going to have to become more complex as you go down the Russian doll. All right. But why Sarway? And then again I ask, what is Sarway then? Why is it Sarway? Welcome to Gomer. Getting a little closer to the fact than you should be, Maddox, on that one.
Why is it Sarway? Why is it what it is? Why does it have the name that it has? You have correctly and astutely observed that I am looking for the reason why it is what it is. Why is it Sarway? Why not anything else? No. Not for some small little hamlet in the middle of nowhere that you have never been to before nor heard of. No. Unfortunately. What is the purpose of its name? What does it define? Why name it at all? Perhaps. Perhaps the question is deeper. Well, I think we have scratched as much of the surface of that as we can at the moment. Both of you seem to be in a rather salad mood. Very well, then. We'll move on to your own queries. He seems consternated, a bit upset, and somehow in the mix of all of that, he still seems, in his own sarcastic way, playful. Well, we'll go in reverse then. What would you ask of me, Yerian? A question, a query. Something for your old father to parse over in his aged mind. What a question! Seu, seu! That is my breo, he says in Alarish. That is my son. A good question. Why Sarway? My Sarway of all places. There are at least 3 passages which lead into the valleys of Rom. One is closely monitored, that being in Breaksfor. The establishment of the Irish within Breaksfor is strong. I have even heard that there is an Eiluvir there. Best to avoid it. Sarway was once a much larger community, almost something of a city more than a town, but it overstretched and overreached back before the plague, before the Parium plague came to the land. It was a Venorian place, a sort of interdisposed middle ground between the great meccas of the Valley of Rom and the rest of Vene, a point of connection. It has history there. It is through Sarway that many of the Venorian themselves traveled, taking pilgrimages through the passes, over the mountain and down and into the valley itself. The path we walk and tread now, these steps we take, mimic the steps of those individuals who in the days of old traveled this land. We are in our own way phantoms, following in their tracks and in their footsteps, mimicking their actions,
retracing their steps as it would be. But why? Because to discover what they discovered and to know what they know, we must understand them from the most visceral level. We must walk in their shoes, the very path they walked, to the exact line. And only then will we discover where they stopped, where they built, where they stooped and kneeled, and where they gilded cups and altars alike, and where they sung holy hyenas to the Archelin themselves, in temples now long vanished into the veil. Why Sarway? Why Rom? It is simply because it is there we will find our fortune, their fortune, now long forgotten. So we trace their steps. But also it is a matter of necessity and less romantic. Sarway itself is the simplest way in and out of the Valley of Rom. But X4 is not an option, and the only other passes come from the south and are guarded by the towers held by one Lord Vano Ilna of Red Tower. Those passes are impassable, except by very strict and severe writs of law which are seldom handed out by the Irish Church. The people of Sarway, in their roots, were once Venorian. They do not find themselves akin to the old way of the Irish, or the new way of the Irish. There are Irish among them, and the Irish are in power within the hamlet, but there are whispers behind closed doors. Wooden idols pulled out from underneath beds, stashed away whenever the lamp man comes near to the window. It is a place of old memory that we now shall unfortunately have to undo for our own purposes. Because to get in to the valleys of Rom, we will need coin. And more than just a little. Does this sufficiently answer your query? He grins. Not too bad. What question would you ask, Arletta? I am slowly redefining myself as an individual who may seek to formally start the usage of corporal punishment. Do not allow me to find my way outside this most fluent wagon to the nearest birch tree and there find a switch for your thighs. Ask me a good question now. You poke the Cabalin. More accurately, the Grost. I'll humor you this once, but only because of our shared blood. As little as that may be. Very well. Why is Gomra Vicenti? He thinks for a second, furrowing his brow and reaching into his robes to pull out his pipe. He lights it and taking a puff, he stares into her eyes. Why? Because there are great things which we must still do. All three of us. Because the Vicentis need someone who can sit at the head of the table. Someone who has proven not to be a failure. Who has always kept the interests of the family in mind. Who has always protected and guarded the words. Gomer Vicente exists in the way he does because he must. Because without me there is no Vicente. And without the Vicente, there would be neither of you. You would be not more than destitute vagabonds, set about on the world, uneducated and unprepared for the world that will break you and will chew you up and consume you. And because a very, very long time ago, I swore that I would find my fortune and my peace. And I plan to share that with those who are worthy, he says, looking to Yarian, and then back to you slower, blinking, and loyal. Now I would ask you if that answered your question, but I assume it has only whetted your appetite to badger me more about such important things. You do. There's a bit of me in both of you. But caution and circumspection, he says, looking to Yarian, and the calculation. The astuteness. A piercing gaze. He says, looking to you. But do not just rely on that which I have taught you. The two of you have much more in common than I make out. There are similarities which go beyond blood. He turns back to the road. It's getting late. Soon the time of Auditory will be upon us, and Arame will grace the sky with her bejeweled gaze. Radiant and lustrous as everywhere, as always. We shall set camp. Look, he says, pointing out of the wagon into the rain and the wind. Though it be a dark day, on the horizon you can see it there, the lamplight. Sarway approaches, but I think not we shall enter it today. I do not wish to come in the wee hours of the night, under the guise of darkness. We shall come at the time of Avine in the morning, when the dawn strikes and the light comes with us. Prophetic, no? He says, lifting an eyebrow and looking between the two of you. I do. Most vehemently. It seems that Yarian is lost on thought. Good. Thinking of the plan, no doubt. You shall have to tell me over dinner. I will be most intrigued to see what you have come up with all this time you've had to think. He brings the cobbler to a halt in a small thicket of trees off the road, just in sight of the lamplight of Sarway on the horizon northward. You are so close to the valleys of Rom you could reach out and touch the mountains themselves, feel the carcasses of stone and ground. He sets about to the task of using some of the dry kindling and wood gathered from earlier, kept within the cart, to set the small fire. Then he turns to you first, Yarian. My boy, bring over some of the mushrooms from the forage, and get me about a quarter of a wooden cup's full of some of the flour. We will use it in the broth for our gruel. We'll let In the meantime, help me cut and prepare the salted pork for the boil. We will need to soak it. The two of you may talk as you go about your tasks. You are, like, within bumping distance of each other within the wagon. And quick while you talk, the campfire's lit and set. The water set to boil, the flour added. The broth slowly cooking, but it will take some time before it is done. You may continue. The stew is done. You have soaked a leathery jerky of pork, salted and preserved in the broth, softening as much as you can. It'll still have quite a chew to it. Meanwhile, a metal grate, or a metal griddle has been placed, or a sheet of metal, over the fire itself. And flimsy cakes of bread made of flour, water, and ground corn are being baked. It'll be the first hot thing that the two of you have really eaten in quite a while. As you speak, Gomer turns over his shoulder.
Yarian, fetch my coin purse from beneath the floorboards of the wagon. I want to see its contents so I know what we're working with when we get into Sawe.
It is under the third floorboard on the left. You prise up the board gently, showing the compartment beneath, built into the wagon by your father himself. You reach down into it and pull out the leathery coin pouch, and the first thing you notice is the lightness of it. You place the board back. The older Vicente man looks down at the pouch and takes it. And then he swears vehemently in Mirkarish. Cash! He glowers as he looks into the contents.
Less than a gov left. 32 senar. It would be a waste to spend it on a place to stay. Not enough.
He grumbles.
Perhaps we can forage and find salt. But unless we pull in enough coin, we will not have the money required for the provisions to travel over the pass, let alone bribe the magistrate of the town for passage.
Looks between the two of you. Luck will change.
Perhaps our luck has to change. It will. It will. And I promise you both that. There will come a time, Yarian and Arletta, when there are shoes on your feet. When you no longer blister from the trail. When we return home at last. To Ealabar. To the towers. To the crowds of people. Who each in turn know our names and our faces.
He seems almost to reminisce for a second then, going back into that way he has, his eyes becoming lucid.
And then we will have position once again. No longer vagabonds on the road. We are Vicentes. That has purpose and meaning. You must believe that. You must.
Then he shakes his head and closes the pouch.
I'll hear about your plan after we eat. But we most likely will be going through with at least a portion of my own. You know it well. We are playing the game of letters.
He grins.
You know what that means.
The game of letters. Something you have done since you were 4. You come into a town. Dressed as well as you can. Gomra on his cart will sit in the middle of that town on the back of the wagon. Prepared with ink and quill. And then, as you have many times before, you and your sister will go through the town crying. And I mean that in the sense of, well, spouting your wares. Speaking to the individual villagers and townsfolk or city dwellers, dependent on your location. Letting them know that a lettered man has come into town. A lettered man who travels far and wide. From the reaches of Daskis to Red Tower and back again. And that he is willing to take any and all requests down in writing, to be delivered to loved ones throughout the land. Perhaps to a soldiering son of a widow, or to a forlorn husband gone to port to trade. Perhaps to find a missing relative and deliver to them the last inheritance of a will, properly written up in the court of the local town magistrate's office. All these things written out by Gomer's hand elegantly in Alarish script. Never, of course, to be delivered to anyone. And on each letter a price, in coin or in trade, for whatever the person can give. It is a common scheme, one which Gomer delights in, especially in peering through the letters after they are written, taking any small coins out of notes, and perhaps keeping any wills to himself. On occasion you bring in enough, but it does not seem like it would be enough to, well, satiate Gomer's current desires. If he has to bribe a magistrate, as he has said, it will be a costly endeavor. You have seen him pay bribes before, and the price is never light. Gomer places the coin pouch back down, placing it inside his robes instead of handing it back to you to place beneath the wagon.
No need to hide what we have. It's so meager it wouldn't be stolen by the most miserly of thieves. It's safe enough on my person as is. Come, let us sit and eat. We have traveled long and hard today. We deserve a rest. Don't we?
He says, looking between the two of you. Since the last time you sat down somewhere, or today? The last time you were in a town, it was Stellenport. And I know the distance. That is 3 weeks on the road, scrounging, trapping, hunting, foraging, eating mushrooms, drinking boiled bark, and licking the dew off of the leaves in the morning when you couldn't find fresh water. The foot wraps that you had in Stellenport, which were fresh, are now worn through, and your feet blistering again, the calluses cracking, your hands tired from toiling through the dirt and digging at the roots near rivers to find what is edible. It's been a long time since you last slept on straw hay or even a bed. Longest since that last one.
Perhaps, I would say, a month. When we left Stellenport,
He says, thinking to himself,
it was... I believe it was the 5th of Lurontir. Or sorry, the 5th of Luron. We must be well into Areni now, as the months go.
I'll go over month timetables at a different point.
If I had to guess, I would say it is the 6th of Areni. Too long a journey. Come, let us eat. Enough of this talk.
You partake and go ahead first. You partake in the stew of leathery pork, mushrooms, flour and roots. All of it is mixed with the taste of birch. The flour a bit burnt, but it's hearty and filling and warm. Most importantly is the latter. Yarian, as you sit by the fire near to your father. He pulls out a flask from his side and opens it. A bit of watered down ale, he says, offering it to you.
How old are you again?
I think it is near your 14th name day.
Old enough to drink.
He's proffering the flask to you. You take some of it. A strange taste. Not favorable, but it warms the stomach. You grimace for a second as you drink some of it down. Gomer laughs, taking the flask back and drinking deeply from it.
That'll be better than this piss in Sarway. They'll have no wine to speak of. At least not what you actually call wine. The grape here withers on the vine.
If it can be said anything for the Vene, it is of the quality of their grapes. The finest vineyards in all the land. Even the Alarish will find themselves hard-pressed to match the Galdamenes of the Duskias of Daskis. Daskian wine is the finest stuff. How I miss it. If only it didn't come with a bitter taste of disdain. He seems melancholic at that. Now then, Yarian, tell us your plan.
If only I had the foresight to bring with me a deck of the Lesser Dream. This would have been much simpler. Alright. But how do we locate them? Marletta? What do you think? One misstep and we get run out of town. We need to be careful.
Yes. The Venorian are persecuted within Vanelan under the Urish rule. That is, in fact, up to you to determine. That is the role you must play.
You needs not answer now. You can think on it, you can sleep on it. You propose, Yarian, then, that we locate any and all Venorian settlers within Sarway, and we play to their religious propensities for superstitious belief. All right. Just making sure I understand the ploy.
And how much would you charge for a reading? He nods.
Yes, I guess it does.
Of course, all good Venorians know that a reading can only be done by, and he looks to you, Arletta, a woman. Thus, you are roped into your brother's plans most concisely. Do you think you can put on the effects of a Prussia? It is. The Prashalan you've met tend to be a bit more theatrical too as well. All right. A young... Very well then, a young Prashalan. Now all we have to do is locate the Venorian. And you have to play your part, and play it well. They sniff out any falsehood, whether they believe that we are Venorian or not, they will sell us out to the Irish for our insensitivity when it comes to their beliefs. Very well. I'm tired. My feet hurt. My back is aches and pain. I'm going to make my way to bed. I suggest the two of you get to sleep as well. We will need our energy for the morrow. I expect both of you to wash in the brook tomorrow morning. I do not care how cold it is. I want to see clean faces and cleaner hair. And if there's anything we can do to make your cheeks more rosy, Arletta, we should go about it. Now, see if you can find any berries when you get up in the morn. We'll make something out of them. It won't be the same as, well, the use of actual powders and rouges, but it will do its point. We need you looking fresh, young, and perhaps a bit wild, he says, grinning, like someone who has seen the contents of the lesser dream and all it has to offer. Yeah, well, I've spoken enough. Put out the fire when you go to sleep. Don't wake me. He pushes himself up and makes his way back over to the wagon, where he pulls himself up and into it. You hear him grumbling as he pulls himself under his thin blankets, and snoring accompanies it soon after, leaving the two of you near by the fire, with only each other for company. A little bit louder if you can, Maddox. It's super, super quiet on my end. The two of you are growing tired. Little to speak of about the fire, little to converse, it seems. And so, as it would be necessitated, sleep must come. Yarian, what do you do? We'll start with you. Alright. You put out the fire. Still raining. Though lighter now. The wind has not relented. With the fire out, there's nothing else for it. Besides, making your way into the cart, and the two of you, again, pulling yourselves together within your bedroll for warmth, as close as you can get, without it becoming awkward. Necessity demands warmth. Last things you would like to say as you slowly make your way to sleep? Or do you silently ruminate, both of you, as you pass into dream? Sounds in character. All right, very well. The time of Auditory comes and passes. The two of you stare, waiting for sleep to come, waiting for that spiral downwards you know so well, waiting for the dream to take hold. A strangeness falls over you both, a sense of exuberance. As your eyes shut in tandem, the dream, at last, takes hold. You feel yourselves drifting down into that space, into that time you know so well. Falling through darkness, through a myriad of beauty, the stars of the night sky expanding about you as your minds stretch. Then the color shifts. And the world falls into dream. It is a moment of drift, accompanied by a sense of weightlessness, and then a swirling of color, a shifting on the canvas of the world as objects and movement takes form before your own two eyes. And then you come awake.
You find yourselves again atop that hill on the prairie. And there is a noise, a sound of flickering fire. A light splays across your vision, glinting warmly off your cheek, your hand, your leg. A stirring of movement, not just a flame. And then you hear it through the wind, a cough, a rattling. A voice breaks the silence.
Von Randokal. Mesra.
No, you have never heard it before, nor are any. It comes from your left. You turn and face. There is a man there. Wizened, hollowed features that speak of malnutrition and an age coming near to its end. Its skin is like an animal's skin that's been stretched thin over a frame of brittle wood, but his eyes are bright and the color of moss. He clasps an old gnarled staff between his legs, cradling it against his chest. His eyes meet with yours and he says again,
Vonran Dokal. Mesra. You come to the plain of Wayland Krova. I have waited long for you.
You come forward as the speaker.
Who am I? Asks this Mesra from the world beyond. My name is Ilakasu of the Kakla Idol. And I have traveled long to find the sacred stone upon which you rest your back. He points to the monolith behind you. And who might you be, Mesra? You can internalize your thoughts as speech between the two of you, by the way, within your mind. Gomra, says the strange withered man. Gomra, you rest your back upon the sacred stone of the plains of Welankrova. Might an old man ask you to move your flesh away from it, is not to touch it? You move the body away from the stone. You feel the cold in your bones as the wind whistles through the air, numbing your fingers and your toes. Come, Mesra. Sit near to the fire that Ilakasu has made. You see that his fire in question has been made over the pit where the body once was. Is that a question? There was a Wayland, one who found himself too weak to carry the weight of his own soul upon his back. But now he has passed. The soul has taken its cost. This is a new experience. The man looks down to the flame, gently wringing his hands on the old staff. I was sent to this stone by the words of the last dying raven, whose entrails had been pulled out by a prairie cat. He said to me, find the great stone in the sea of whistling grass, and there tend a small fire, and you shall be met by a stranger. That's not supposed to play. Forgetting my music lap over. My bad. Moving on. One sec. Where was I? Because he was still finishing his thought. It's just the music thing confused me. You shall be met by a stranger, and they shall be the end of your long journey.
Aletta, you were going to speak and come forward? Okay.
And since I have not yet seen another of the Wayland upon the ancient prairie, I am determined that you are the one I have been sent by the dying raven to meet. But I have not yet passed on. So is it truly the end of my journey itself? Or is there more that the bird required? Who can say? Ravens lie, but they also carry within themselves the souls of those who must pass. It was not the raven's voice that spoke from his steely beak, but the spirit of another man from another life, held within the raven's chest as it lay torn and broken. Perhaps I am meant to meet you, to cross paths with you, Mesra, but I cannot say.
The old wizened man, whose name is Ila Kasu, turns quickly, looking over his back. Do you hear it, Mesla? You can hear the changing tune from the throats of the many stalks as they are bent and broken. Something approaches across the Wayland. You move over to the edge where the man looks, and you hear it as well. The song of the whistling stalks has changed, becoming more erratic, more chaotic. You see through them a man wading through them. And you look at him and you see that his chest is wounded. There is something burning from within him, slowly consuming him. An ember, a cinder. Look, Mesra, says Ilekasu, pointing down at the man.
He carries a soul which burns too bright for him. His journey soon will end, but it has not been in vain. For here we are, you and I, to greet him in his last moments. Who knows? The soul he carries may have been a gift, a burden which he must have brought to us.
I know not of this strange individual whom you name. Quickly, more lively than you would expect, Ilekasu begins to descend the hillside, which on its other side is flatter and easier to traverse than the side you came up. Go ahead, though. Sorry. Alright, you take control then. You begin moving down the hill with Elekasu, until at last the two of you stand before the sea of grass where it spreads out. The tribesman pushes his way through, his nut-brown skin covered in sweat, his eyes delirious. He collapses on the ground in front of the two of you, and Elekasu looks down to him. You see the man was propping himself up with a long tribal spear, the end of which is held a long sharpened bone. That bone in question is as long as the tip of your finger down to the base of your wrist, and needle thin. Quickly, Elekasu moves to him, turning him over so that he looks up to the sky, and then he lowers himself, bringing his ear close to the man's mouth as it moves. And then the man's eyes close. He convulses slightly, and you watch as his chest burns. Any action you would like to take, either of you?
Shit. I need to remember that that is on that timer. Go ahead.
He told me his name, which was Drydu. He was a spearman and a husband.
Go ahead.
He was of the Wayland Krova. From his tribe came many great warriors. A dark spirit consumed many souls within his tribe. But he escaped. He too was sent here by the words of another. And his path has crossed with ours. A strange moment of confluence on the prairie. The soul he buries, or he bears, is important, and now I shall take it from him. But what its purpose is, I cannot say.
You see smoke pouring out of the man's mouth. Quickly, Elekasu lowers himself, opening his mouth and placing it over the other man's. Smoke pours into him, out his nose, his ears, his eyes turning strange, and then you see the burning fire inside the man's chest dissipate and then is gone, leaving only a burned, broken hole for both his clothing and his ribs, the charred remnants inside gone. Elikasu coughs and shakes, turning to look at you.
It is our burden now, this thing. We must take it to a place where that soul can find ascension. Perhaps you would accompany me, Mesra. It seems you have arrived at this moment for a purpose. But I will not begrudge you if you turn away this old man's path. I leave that fate to you. Very well. I am glad to have your company, Mesra. Gomra.
He grins.
But we must be careful. The prairie cats of the Wayland Grova will eat us in our sleep. Take his spear.
I have my staff.
It is yours now. But note that it is a weighty responsibility to carry such a talisman.
Reach down, gripping the strange haft of the spear with its long, pointed bone glinting under the light of the moon. As you look at it, you feel the dream shift and change, sound altering, color fading, and that sense of lifting coming at last to bring you from from dream into the waking world. It is in that moment that you are brought in a moment of conflux and come at last to the waking world. And that is where we will end that for now.